The sub-roadbed is ready. I hope you'll stay tuned for this layout update. Hi, I'm really glad you could join me today. This will just be a quick layout update for June 2019. I had hoped to have the backdrops painted and installed by now. Just make it so much easier to have them out of the way before I start adding too much to the layout. But they'll be painted out on my back deck, and we've had some unusually wet weather. So I went ahead and installed all the sub-roadbed. It's all locked down, it's solid, it's level, and it's ready to go. Let's take a look. It might be a little difficult to visualize what all these tracks are doing without the terrain in place. So I'm going to start with a brief overview of all the sub-roadbed. Then I'll highlight a few areas and explain in more detail. The sub-roadbed sections were connected using splice plates, as you can see here. The sub-roadbed is attached to the benchwork using plywood risers. At key points along the sub-roadbed, I installed risers with elongated holes. Once the sub-roadbed was fully supported, I could adjust the risers to ensure that I had a nice smooth grade and that the sub-roadbed was level from side to side. Then I locked the risers down with a couple of screws. Once I was happy with the sub-roadbed, I supported the rest of it with just plain risers. The sub-roadbed was then attached to the risers just using a couple screws. Once all the risers were in place, I added 1 inch by 3/4 inch plywood supports underneath the sub-roadbed to support it, as you can see here. There are places where I have not added the supports yet. Either there will be a bridge installed there, or I'm waiting to work out the terrain. Here is an eye-level view of the P&W tracks as they leave Norristown Terminal, and the same view from the benchwork level. This view will be open to Bridgeport in the background. Here I've added temporary supports to hold up the P&W bridge. The bridge will span from the Norristown Terminal on your right to the hill here in Bridgeport on the left. To try and give you a better idea of the terrain I'm planning, here is a bench level view of Bridgeport, and I've overlaid a graphic showing the approximate location of the terrain. I wanted to depict the valley idea in this part of the layout. So the terrain will be at its highest elevation at the back and then also at the front, with the lowest elevation, or the valley, being everything in between. This is a little further to the left, and I put up an overlay of the foreground terrain. The tracks in the foreground are raised to approximately the height of the terrain, while the tracks in the background will be supported by a bridge. All the tracks in the terrain in the middle ground are lower, and this will allow a nice open view into Sweetland and the Ellenwood Steel Company's blast furnace. Here's an eye-level view of the Schuylkill River, which is crossed by 3 bridges. And the same view at bench level, showing temporary supports for the bridges where the piers will ultimately go. On this side of the layout, the terrain will be more typical. It will slope down from the backdrop and mat sunk area to the front edge at Upper Darby. This brings us around to the entrance of the train room. This is where Peacock's Lock Viaduct, the stone arch bridge that I've been scratch building, will be positioned. There is one place that I need to fix, here where the Pensy line goes over the ump at Sweetland. I really didn't plan this place very well at all. It sits directly over the ump lines, and while a train could pass underneath, it's just too close for comfort. So I'm going to have to come up with a solution for this. These tracks behind Bridgeport will lead to all off-layout locations for the Pensy. On the other side of this wall is the stairwell up from the first floor. So I'll be punching a hole through the wall, which will lead to Creek Bend Yard. It won't be a filler yard as it's about 12 feet or so above the landing, but it will serve as storage for 4 or 5 tracks with a minimum of a little bit over 10 feet in length. I still want to get the backdrops painted and installed before I get too much further along. Thankfully, the weather forecast for this week is promising. And I do have a big box of cork waiting at my office for me. So the next couple weeks should see some decent progress on the layout. I really hope you enjoyed this update. And I thank you so much for watching and for following along with me. Till next time.